Chapter 7. Day after day, and Alex lost count, he joined the boys in scouting the cold city in the early morning and at dusk, scraping at its ribs for food, fighting the cold, the wind, the snow, avoiding the soldiers and the police. Alex had become adept at identifying the arms of the law, the regular police in their black uniforms, red caps, carrying revolvers and clubs, and the GPU, the secret police, in khaki with green caps, and the soldiers who carried rifles with fixed bayonets. As time went by, Alex became to blend in with the urchins. Even in his fine coat and boots were so shabby and wet that they were not salutable any more. Nevertheless, they embarrassed him, and he felt resentment from some of the boys when he pried his cold feet into his wet boots while they rewrapped theirs in grimy rags. But the younger boys were so respectful of his ability to read that with them Alex felt quite dignified, almost like his father. He read to them from Miska's book of folk tales about Videmi, dreadful old witches who lived in a hovel that moved on chickens' feet. And also, Alex became an educator. He began to try to teach a few of the most eager boys to read. Once he brought back to the cellar a handbill from a fence and used its big letters to instruct them. This is an A, here is an F and a G, and he'd hunt for the alphabet and the sign. Do you see these words? They say do not. Now when you see these words on a sign, you will know what they say. You can read them. The boys were entranced that they could read the two words. Sometimes during these lessons, Peter lingered around the edge of the circle, rapping his feet, whittling with his knife, or just lying nearby with eyes slightly open. Alex never asked him or anyone to join the circle, though he would have liked to. He was more educated, but he did not feel Peter's equal here in the streets of Moscow. It was cold when Alex had arrived in Moscow, and it had never ceased to be so. And now it was more bitter than ever. Boris's finches had died, leaving him angry. He stamped around the cellar, his breath steaming in front of him, and Alex had the feeling it was his anger that he was venting. On a cold January day, Alex and Ivan stood in a long line, despite the cold, collecting money for holding places. Food was getting scarce again, and the vendors in the market were not standing out in the cold with their meager vegetables. One needed kopecks to buy the government bread. Beside the line, several old women sold tea made from hot water from portable samovars. The people in the line stood silent in a long, snaking curve. The snow fell silently above them. The building was draped in red flags with black borders. Come on, Ivan said, when his clients had returned to claim their places. Let's get back in the line again. No, wait, Alex said. As long as we're here, let's see him. Why do you want to see a dead man? Ivan said. Alex didn't know, but in a few minutes he was looking down into the face of Lenin, the head of the government. Who had died a few days before. Once, when he was very young, Alex's father had taken him to see the Tsar ride by in a carriage. He didn't really know if he remembered it or if he remembered his father telling him of it. What would his father say if he knew he had stood and looked into the face of one of the people who had overthrown the Tsar's government? The weather blocked Moscow from food from the outside. The government bread stores opened infrequently. The vendors and peddlers had disappeared. Kostya and Alex were standing in the square in the shelter of a building. Swarms of other children drifting like passing storms, their tight little faces red with cold, their eyes dark with circles, limbs failing to combat the wind. And from one such flight, a small girl, struggling to keep up, stumbled and fell into the snow too deep for her. She lay there, abandoned in the marketplace, as her flock flew on without her. Alex expected the girl to get up and run to join her companions, but she did not. She lay in the snow, her tears freezing on her face. It was then that Alex's feet took him out into the middle of the square. Leave her, Kostya hissed. But perhaps for the first time, Alex paid no attention to the orders of others. The wind blew snow around in a way that would soon cover the child, but she did not move herself. Alex bent down. Get up, he said sternly. You will freeze. He reached his hand out to her. She seemed very small, very pale, from what could see beneath the smears of dirt and the patches of snow. Come, Alex said, and he half pulled her across the square to the wall against which the children were huddled. You should have left her, Kostya said. The soldiers would have found her. Now what are you going to do with her? Take her back to the cellar, of course. What else can we do? We don't have girls, Ivan said. They're too much trouble. Everyone knows that, and this one is too small. Miska is small, Alex said. But Miska is smart and he's not half dead, and besides, he's a boy and he can keep up with us, Kostya replied. Miska was half dead when Peter found him in the children's home in the south, Ivan told me. He gave the little girl a tap as if he might burn his hand. What's your name? Anya, she said, her eyes wide, looking with fright at her judges. She shivered uncontrollably, and Alex took off his heavy coat and threw it over her. It trailed around her comically. Come, we'll take her over to the children's home on Pochtovaya Street and leave her at the gate, Kostya said. The child turned to run, and would have, had she not been mired in the snow that continued to fall. No, she screamed. But they will take care of you and feed you, Alex said. The child gave him a look that would have burned a hole in a good pot, and then uttered an obscenity that stunned him, coming from that small mouth. He tried to imagine his little sister uttering such an oath, and his mind would not permit it. I was there, Anya said. My brother and I ran away. I would never go back, not ever. Where's your brother then? Alex asked. The soldiers got him. They said he was too old to be a bezprizioni. They put him in prison. I don't know where he is. How old was he? Kostya said. About 15, but he was big and strong. Now she started to cry again. We can't stand here all day talking about it, Kostya said. You take her back to the cellar and let Peter settle it. I've got better things to do. I'm going to try the other market and see if there's anything stirring. He was off like an animal in the snow, foraging. Alex led the frozen child down the streets and back to the now familiar cellar that he had begun to regard as his home. Strange, the dank and odorous place radiated welcome when compared with the heavy skies and emptiness of the city streets. Miska was tending the fire, and when Alex entered, ran to meet him. What have you got? We have water nearly boiling, he called. We found nothing, Alex said. There was no food coming into the city. Peter will find some, Miska says. Peter almost always finds some. Who's that boy? That boy is a girl, Alex said, laughing. Her name is Anya. She fell in the snow and was left by her band. Will you look out for her until I come back? A girl, Miska said. Well, come to the fire and get warm. Alex left them. In a few hours, everyone was back empty-handed except for Kostya, who had the kopecks from selling a coat he had stolen, but said he could not buy bread for them. Peter came in panting. That was close, he said. Too close. I took the lunch pails of 4 soldiers from the barracks. They chased me clear around Moscow. Wouldn't you think the Suksins would have something better to do? The pails yielded a small amount of bread and some cold boiled potatoes. It was not much for so many hungry children, but it was something. When Boris complained about the size of his portion, Peter laughed harshly. It's more than those 4 soldiers are having. Now, for the first time in the dim light, he caught sight of Anya, who'd been asleep in the corner. Who is that one? Alex thought it was the first time he had seen Peter show surprise. He always seemed to accept everything as it happened. Alex said, Her name is Anya. She's been abandoned by her band. We found her in the snow. Please let her stay, Peter. We have no room for girls, Peter said, turning away. Please, Peter, we can't throw her out in the snow. That's where you found her, isn't it? Stand up, he ordered Anya. Look how small she is. Who is to look after her when we are on the move? Tell me that. I will, Alex said. I have looked after my little sister at home. And I will, Miska piped. And she doesn't take up much food. Has anyone kept anything to eat from their ration? Peter asked. She should have something now. Alex had seen Boris and some of the boys put small bits of food in their shirts from time to time. He wished he could learn to squirrel away some of his ration himself, but he was always too hungry. Now it was only Ivan who came forth. Alex looked around at the boys he could see in the firelight. Finally, Leon said, All right, here's a bit more. He reached under his shirt. Miska brought a bowl of hot water. No one has to look after me, Anya said, as she had gobbled up the food in a few bites. I looked after myself. I even tie my own boots. Look. She held up her tiny feet wrapped in rags. Here, Peter said, we will give you new boots. He showed her where the pile of rags was. We'll decide what to do with you later. In the night, a fierce wind blew the snow in drifts against the entrance to the cellar. When they'd cleared a way through to the street, it was to find that icy winds still blew, gnawing at their ill-covered bodies, and they had to move quickly to keep from freezing to the spot. Once again, the marketplace was a snowy field. There would be no peddlers today. They retreated to the relative warmth of the cellar. Only Peter stayed out in the bitter weather. When he returned, it was empty-handed and with bad news. Almost nothing is coming into the city, he said. The farmers have used up all their winter stores of potatoes, cabbage, and grains, and any carts coming toward the city have been raided by hoodlums. He looked around at the band of children huddled around the smoking fires, taking what little warmth could be had from them. We must make plans, he said. It is much too early, but I think we have to go south. It will be less cold than here, and there must be something in the fields. Roots, at least. And melons, shouted Miska. No melons yet, dumbhead, Leon said. We'll go down to the station at dawn and wait for the first train south, Peter said. Let's build up the fires with all the trash now, because we will not be this warm for a while. It was possible in the firelight to kindle hope of a promised land, to push aside anxiety, the cold, the damp, the irritation of lice and fleas, the pain of separation, loss, and loneliness. Chapter 8. They were at the Kazan station before it was fully light, their breaths steaming away from them through the frosty air. There was nothing moving. A few early passengers were stamping about, waiting for the train south, but their stamping was muffled by the snow. In the corners were the same kind of dirty, living sacks Alex had seen at the station in Kovrov. When Leon approached one of the passengers, begging, he was immediately knocked into the snow by one of the sacks that had leapt up. You can't work here, you Slovloch. This is our territory. The passenger backed off nervously, leaving the two urchins to battle it out. You don't own the station, Leon protested. We own the right to work in this station, the boy snarled, and if you want us to prove it, we will. Peter came up. Go back to your band, he said. We have not come to work. We are just waiting to leave. To Leon, he said, don't you have any more sense than to call attention to us now? He was angry. But Peter, this station doesn't belong to them. Maybe it does in a way. The cellar belongs to us, doesn't it? They are here working it, and so they are protecting their working place. Do you want to fight over that and get us all picked up? In a short time, the station was teeming with people dressed in woolens and furs, the vapor rising from their mouths mixed with the steam of the engine of the train for the Caucasus. The enormous portraits of Lenin and Marx looked sternly down. Upon the platforms were dozens of children, wrapped in rags, plied their trade, begging, stealing, while others leaned against the walls of the station, smoking, laughing, poking fun at the behavior of the travelers. But not all the travelers were well dressed. Peasants and working people carried bundles of their possessions, crowded into the less comfortable carriages, arranging themselves on wooden benches. In the corner, a poorly dressed man took a piece of bread from his pocket and sat down to eat it. Immediately, he was surrounded by 10 children, who watched his mouth open and close on each bite, their eyes stealing the bread from him, poisoning it. He took 2 more bites, hesitating before each one, then broke the rest in bits and handed it to them. Go on, take it. Take it, go on, eat all of it, and he boarded the train eagerly. All passengers board, the train guard called when the Chetivonok rang and the steam swirled up in great clouds from the engine. Alex's heart beat fast as he followed Peter and the rest of the band along the gray walls of the station and across the tracks to the side of the train away from the platform. Where are we going to sit? He asked Kostya, who was next to him. We have reserved seats, Kostya laughed in his hard, mirthless way. Peter pointed and gave Ivan and Leon a shove. They drove under the train and, to Alex's horror, climbed into a small black box slung beneath the carriage. Not in there, he whispered to Kostya. Where else, your highness? In the first-class carriages, perhaps? Peter pointed to the black box beneath the next carriage. There, you two. What about Anya? Alex asked. I shall see to her myself, Peter said. We don't want anyone falling onto the tracks. But this isn't even big enough for a dog, Alex protested. Oh, yes, it is, Kostya said. It's just what they're for. Only not so many dogs are traveling these days, so we can have their berths. I wish you were a dog, in fact, because then I could eat you. You wouldn't, Alex said, disgusted. Wouldn't I? Have you ever really? Are you fooling? Certainly. Everyone has. So have you. I brought some myself to the cellar one day when you were ill. Why do you look like that? Would you prefer human meat? Alex thought he might vomit. He thought of his dog, Sergei, at home. When he had disappeared, had it been because someone had eaten him? Kostya, he said, you make too many jokes like that. You say things like people eating people. You say it a lot, Kostya. Kostya said nothing. A terrible thought came to Alex, but he dismissed it. Well, I know you've never done that, Kostya. Kostya? Have you? He whispered that, and yet he knew the answer would be a negative. Still, he needed Kostya to confirm it, to say he was joking as he always joked in his hard, unsmiling way. Yes, Kostya answered, but he said it quietly without the animation of his usual conversation. But we did not kill anyone, he hurried to add. It was sold to us. We would have starved in the village that time otherwise. I did not know who it was. Alex was numb from cold and from horror. How did you feel? He whispered, and his whisper hissed into the steam of the engine as the train slowly began to move. After a bit, Kostya answered, I was glad it was not me. The train picked up steam, and the biting cold of the wind chilled the black boxes of children packed like fish, salted with soot and grime, trundling their way to a dream world of warmth and food. Cold, hunger, anxiety, and fatigue, added to the motion of the train, finally dragged Alex into sleep, and he had no idea how much time had passed when he awoke startled. The train was standing still, and his limbs and back felt as if they had been struck with a cleaver. A guard was shouting, Out of there, wretches, or I will beat you to pulp with this club. And he poked into the boxes, prodding the children, who leapt out and dashed from under the train. Where are we, Alex? Asked Kostya. I don't know. Maybe Lipsark, maybe Voronezh. It's all the same until we're in the south. Cold. Come on, we may be able to get something to eat. He led Alex back under the train. In the station, they saw the better dressed people descending to get tea and food. Old grannies, swathed in woolens and scarves, carrying buckets on yokes, stood about selling water for a kopeck a glass. Alex caught sight of Miska and some of the other boys. Ivan was carrying Anya and extending his hat to some of the travelers. My sister's very ill, he said. I must get her some hot tea. Anya hung in his arms so limply that Alex was alarmed. A gentleman dropped a coin into the hat, and Ivan was off to the tea peddler with Anya, marvelously recovered, hurrying behind him. Kostya said, Come on, let's get some tea and some bread. But we have no money. We do now, Kostya said, holding up a few kopecks. Where'd you get them? The hand is fast, the eye is slow, Alex laughed. I remember. Watch everything, a lady said to her family. Those dreadful children are everywhere like a plague. Here's a nice piece of stale bread, a man said to his son. You may give it to them if you wish. Oh, yes, said the child. Let's see which one I will give it to. No, not that one, or that one. And then they were boarding again. This time, all the boxes seemed to fill up before Kostya and Alex got to them. Well, it's the pipe under the engine, then. If we hurry and if we're lucky, Kostya said, and quickly led Alex to the front of the train, just about to leave. Alex could not believe that he was following Kostya into a sooty pipe, barely big enough around to accommodate their bodies. This is a little warm, at least, Kostya said. That's the good in it. That was the only good in it. Alex could scarcely breathe for the soot lodged in the pipe, nor move for the tiny diameter of the space in which they were wedged. He did not know how much time passed this way. It seemed interminable. He was so cramped and uncomfortable. But somewhere in the journey a miracle happened, and Alex saw it as time rolling back to a better day. The snow became less dense, then mixed with patches of brownish yellow earth, then almost disappeared. There appeared, after many hours, a thin veil of tannish green above the ground that flew by them. The fields. The bitter cold moderated, and the chilly air seemed balmy compared to Moscow's deep cold. When Kostya and Alex poked their heads out of the pipe, they were traveling slowly through the countryside with virtually no snow, except on distant mountains. Green showed on some low bushes and on trees in the distance, although all those around the cities had been felled for fuel. The sight caused Kostya to shout loudly like a horse that had been frightened by a bear. Alex's line of vision beneath the carriages permitted him a view of other children peeking out of black boxes, seeing a world that was not wholly bleak, chilled, and hopeless. The noise of the engine did not permit conversation, even freedom of motion, to bang Kostya on the back as he wished. For the first time in many months since he left his home, Alex felt joy. Immediately guilt struck him. How can I laugh and feel happy, he thought. He would not have believed if someone had told him that it was, indeed, possible to feel joy and pain at the same time.